Welcome to the Mrs. R Relevant Daily Draft Podcast. I am joined today by Josh, and Owen is having car problems, so maybe we'll see Owen, maybe we don't. But Josh, it is a Wednesday. We are in the middle of the dog days of summer here in June. How are you?
No, I'm good. I'm looking forward to Wednesdays every week on the Draft Professor channel. We go over two teams on the AFC side here on Wednesdays, and then on Thursdays we go over two NFC teams. We've been doing this for a couple weeks now. We're going to continue this until we get all 30 teams rolling. But here at the Draft Professor, you're getting content Monday through Friday, and then occasionally on the weekends as well until we get back into the college football season. If you're looking for daily college football content, talking about draft prospects this year, last year, you know where to go. The Draft Professor has over 50 different creators that contribute to this thing. It's growing exponentially. You just make sure you're checking us out. We're giving you guys what you want throughout the summer, throughout these dog days.
Yeah. So it's funny, right? Because Josh, you and Jake, when you were doing running backs and linebackers last year, you were the second podcast that got spun up. And I remember we had a lot of podcasts where like 4 people would watch or 7. And now, on a good night, we're getting 200 or 300.
Oh, yeah.
Like, it's amazing. Like you said, exponential growth. It's been amazing. Absolutely amazing. So we are going to start by talking about the Denver Broncos and the schemes they run. So, Josh, what side of the ball do you want to start on for Denver?
We'll start on the offensive side of the ball just because they added a little bit more to that side than the defensive side this offseason. But that's really where they made the most improvements with Bo Nix, their first-year quarterback, stepping in with Sean Payton. You started to see that offense elevate from where it once was with Russell Wilson at the helm, with Nathaniel Hackett as their head coach, having that offense, seeing what is transformed now after a couple seasons into the Sean Payton era in Denver. It's really refreshing to see, and it's giving this team a lot of hope going into the next couple of years that they have a true playoff window and can compete in a heavily stacked AFC West.
Cool. And how would you describe like their hold on. And you were just talking about the offense. How would you describe like they're doing like outside zone, inside zone?
Well, it's very much a mix going into this season. Last year it was a mixed balance of both. Really just a simplified system to try to get gap scheme runs efficient so they can work play action for Bo Nix to ease him into the Sean Payton offense. Let's not get this twisted. This is not a regular offense in the NFL. Every NFL offense is complicated, but Sean Payton times that by 2 with the intellectualities of the routes, the tempo, the timing, getting the quarterback run involved, having every play at his disposal, running trick plays, situational plays, 2-minute drill. There's a lot to understand in this offense, and I think he did a great job developing Bo Nix into that. So when you got into the thicker part of the year, you started to see the 3-level concept, short, intermediate, deep, really unlock with Bo Nix, and you started seeing fireworks in that offense for the first time in a couple years. But with their running backs, their new addition of J.K. Dobbins coming over from the Los Angeles Chargers, the NFL Comeback Player of the Year, really effective in Baltimore and Los Angeles as really an outside zone type running back where you get him a one-cut angle and he has the speed to go to the house. He has a good vision as well. They were going to rock with a combo of R.J. Harvey and Audric Estime as their 1-2 punch. Would have been one of the most inexperienced 1-2 punches before adding Dobbins, but R.J. Harvey was the real surprise pick, some would say, in the second round, them going after their guy who was on track to be the RB1 of this team, a really good running back from UCF who also specializes in that outside zone scheme, getting him a one-cut lane to cut back into the middle of the field. And one thing you'll notice about Sean Payton's offense, they love running backs that can catch out of the backfield, and R.J. Harvey fits that mold especially well. So with him, J.K. Dobbins, Jaleel McLaughlin providing a third down running back role as well, Audric Estime as more of that change-up power back. They want to run this thing through their running backs and really open up the play-action game for Bo Nix because their weapons aren't spectacular. They've never been under a Sean Payton scheme. Last time they was with Marquise Colson and Jimmy Graham back 10 years ago with the New Orleans Saints. They've always worked with what they got. in the skill position, the receiving room, but they like to simplify things and make things easy for Bo Nix with his first year in the NFL. So let's see how much they start opening up the different kinds of things they can call for him in year 2.
So a couple questions about, let's say, Sean Payton offense. Like, I definitely recognize, like when you talked about like the 3-layer receiver concepts, that resonates from what I remembered New Orleans doing when he coached there.
Mm-hmm.
How similar do you see, and this is a bad comparison, but I'm going to make it anyway. So you have Drew Brees in New Orleans with Sean Payton, and you have Bo Nix in Denver with Sean Payton.
Mm-hmm.
Like, New Orleans never struck me as a team that ran the ball a lot, but this Denver scheme looks like it's going to run the ball more than a Sean Payton, Drew Brees team would have ran. But what's your take on that?
Well, it is very similar when you compare the 10 years ago to today, but they have to adjust with what personnel they have. So when we talk about the two teams we're going over per week, scheme, all-season moves, and personnel, this is the personnel side of it. Bo Nix is a more mobile quarterback outside the pocket than Drew Brees ever was. Drew Brees was more trusted to throw the ball 40, 45 times a game, throw it to any part of the field at any time of the game, always hang in the pocket, have great instincts and awareness because that's what he was naturally gifted at. Bo Nix is naturally gifted at extending plays outside the pocket, keeping his eyes downfield, being able to make something out of nothing. And the quarterback run game is really much a factor in this offense compared to what it was with Drew Brees in New Orleans back 10 years ago. They lean on that more, get less passes for Bo Nix, less attempts compared to Drew Brees. So I think they're, again, trying to ease Bo Nix into the NFL. But let's be real. Everybody had little simmer expectations to Bo Nix and Sean Payton coming into the NFL just because Bo Nix was looked at as the worst of the top 6 or 7 quarterbacks last year, and everybody was kind of writing him off. I was right there with them. He was a second-round quarterback for me, and mostly all the other quarterbacks were first-round guys. But you got to give it to Bo Nix on how well he was able to take OTAs and mini camps year 1, being able to understand everything in that offense and be a leader for that team. You saw the growing pains, especially in the first month of the season. But when he started getting comfortable, you really started to see the new thing Sean Payton can do, opening up the QB run game, really getting into play action more because that's what Sean Payton's always wanted to do. He couldn't really do that with Russell Wilson. Drew Brees in the latter half of his career, of course he could execute it, but he wasn't to the same stature that he was. I think Sean Payton and Bo Nix really bring improvising element to this offense that Sean Payton hasn't seen in a while.
Yeah, I'm excited for the Denver offense. Going into last season, I don't know that I had expectations for the Denver offense, right? If you're bringing in a rookie quarterback, right? Because Denver, if memory serves me correctly, when Denver came in to the last season, when Denver came into last season, they had a lot of cap issues, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because they still had the Russell Wilson dead cap hits.
Yep.
Right. That was last year, right?
Mm-hmm.
So meaning that, like, my expectations for Denver, like Denver made the playoffs last year. They were probably 3 to 4 wins over my expectation. So my opinion is they overachieved. But the reason I say that is that now I have expectations for the Denver offense. And it's like, have they done enough to, let's say, uncork it or let it all hang out? But Bill, what do you think?
Yeah, so I think when you look at Denver, the Bo Nix timeline really
Hey Bill,
really
check your internet.
accelerated things, especially when you're talking about a young rookie quarterback. There we go. Am I back?
You're back. You were talking really
Can you hear me?
slowly. Yeah. Oh, okay. And we may have lost Bill again. So, okay, we'll see if that comes back. But Josh, like, what was your, let's say, if you look at, let's say, Denver's offense last year, and you talked about the offense making a jump, what do you think that jump looks like? Like, do you think it's a certain type of players scheme they can run with a second-year quarterback, or do you just think it's more of what they did last year?
I think it's going to rely heavily on the development on their young core of receivers and then Evan Ingram being added into this offense because of all the dead cap issues like you alluded to and them not having enough money last year to really spend as much as they wanted to on the skill set position. They had to rely on Cortland Sutton being that true one, which he was. He was healthy, and it was really good to see the correlation him and Knicks put together year one. But they were relying on Marvin Mims taking a jump, Devon Bele out of Utah coming in and being a starter for the most part in their offense. Drafting Troy Franklin last year, they had sky hope expectations for him. He really wasn't up to the curve as a lot of us expected him to. But that's going to be the next deciding thing on if this offense could take the leap, in my opinion. If Bo Nix, of course, takes the year one from year two jump, how a rookie quarterback should develop normally. But the development of Troy Franklin, how much and how impactful Devon Bele and Marvin Mims will be as starters, quote unquote, for this receiving core. And Pat Bryant, who they brought in the third round, who I really love for this offense. Sean Payton has been raving about him being sort of like how Michael Thomas was coming in. Cannot compare the two because there was a drastic difference of both of them coming out of the draft. But when you're looking about how Sean Payton wants to use them in the quick slant game, trying to get them the ball 1-2 step releases, get the ball in their hands, big body type, possession type receivers, there's a real role for him to carve out as well. So how Evan Ingram gets incorporated, as well as the development of the young core of wide receivers on this team, will determine how much they improve from last year.
So, Bill, what was your comparison in your draft eval between Troy Franklin and Pat Bryant? Like, what was your eval on both, and how do you see them fitting into Denver?
So when I looked at Pat Bryant was essentially the Michael Pittman Jr. of last year's class. He was a big body receiver, could get vertical in a hurry, whereas Troy Franklin was more of the quick but not fast type of wide receiver. He would excel in space, those slant routes, those quick bang routes that Josh just talked about. That's Troy Franklin's wheelhouse. Whereas Pat Bryant, he's going to be that guy that you push it down the field, the vertical routes, the go balls, the post routes. That's what you want Pat Bryant to do. And ultimately, one of them is going to have to step up. The biggest statistic that I'm going to throw out here tonight when we talk Denver, you look at their 2024, Cortland Sutton had 135 targets. The next closest player was Javonte Williams with 70.
Yeah.
This offense ran through Bo Nix and Cortland Sutton, and that's great for 1 year, but it's not sustained success because teams are going to key in on that. So I think it's going to be probably we talk about running backs by committee. I think it's going to be a wide receiver 2 by committee between Troy Franklin, Vele, between Pat Bryant, between Troy Franklin. I think ultimately, in a perfect world, you would have Pat Bryant on the outside. You'd slide Troy Franklin to the inside. And then you run some sort of running back by committee between Audric Estime and, of course, RJ Harvey and J.K. Dobbins, provided he can stay healthy. Find every piece of wood that you've got and knock on it, and every rabbit's foot that you can get your hands on if you're a Denver fan, and start casting spells and hope that he can stay healthy, because he hasn't shown it. And I would not be confident in it. I wouldn't buy stock in a full J.K. Dobbins season. But anything that he can provide is going to be above and beyond what they've had in the past. And one of the big things that's often underestimated when we talk about Sean Payton loves the joker role. He loves the guys that are running backs, tight ends, that are pass catchers, that are flexible, the Evan Ingrams. I think Evan Ingram is going to have a much larger role in this offense than we're giving him credit for right now in June. Would it shock me if he's second in targets next season? Absolutely not. Not with the way Sean Payton likes to live. Like I talked about in the comments, Sean Payton will commit war crimes to get a bootleg and get Bo Nix out rolling and throw an intermediate part of the field, which is where your tight end and your running back on a Texas route, on a wheel route, on a crosser, that's where they're going to live. So that's why he loves those running backs. It's why I think Troy Franklin's probably going to have a little bit more success, because Bo Nix has an NFL arm, but he's not that ball 50, 60 yards down the field. He's trying to intermediate throw it 20, 25 yards on those deep crossers.
Yeah. And Josh, how about you? Like, where was Troy Franklin for you? Because I think we weren't draft professors then, right? So I don't know that I knew either of you during that draft cycle, but I think Franklin, I remembered him being fast, but he dropped, I think, more than I expected.
Yeah,
So,
and a lot of people felt the same way about the draft circuit. I know some people that I'm very close with that were very high on Troy Franklin, having him as a no doubt first round type wide receiver. He's kind of like how Devontae Walker was coming out, really high potential. Everybody had him ranked super high, could be a potential top 50 pick. That ultimately decided to slide down. I don't think that they are the same caliber of prospect. I had Troy Franklin as a second round grade. I obviously saw the size concerns, him being able to track the ball consistently downfield, winning those contested catch scenarios. Those were all very important issues on his scouting report. But the way he's able to move in the open field quicker, not faster, what Bill alluded to earlier, but the way he's able to shift in and out of his breaks, how elusive he was in the open field, being able to take things after the catch. And I think we all expected a lot because he was brought back in with Bo Nix, both of them coming in from the same college their rookie year. We automatically assumed that continuity would continue on into the regular season and their rookie years in the NFL. It just didn't turn out that way. You saw flashes of it, like against the Bills in the playoffs. There was a shot in the first quarter, I believe, where they took Troy Franklin. You can see that they want that. They're envisioning that in their future, but whether Troy Franklin wasn't ready for the offense yet or his development didn't allow it to, they had to rely on guys like Marvin Mims taking that jump, Devon Bailey being a solid outside receiver. So it really is dependent on how much he can improve on the little things in the NFL, because the continuity with the quarterback is there, and there's a needing hole for a wide receiver too on this team. Evan Ingram will take over that role as the gadget slot guy, like you alluded to, and I think Sean Payton's ecstatic about that. But you cannot give Cortland Sutton 130 targets a season and expect to be a top 4 AFC team. It's not there.
Yeah, and I actually think there is more to the wide receiver by committee than we haven't spent enough time talking about that. I don't know that we have enough time on this podcast to talk about it, but I think there's something about how you build a wide receiver room. Because we're seeing Green Bay do it. Buffalo converted to that. Kansas City's doing that. You might even be able to say New England is doing that surrounding Drake May with wide receiver by committee as well. So I think there's some merit to that.
But before we move on with the Denver offense, we haven't talked about the offensive line yet. And while they are not a top 5 offensive line in the NFL, you have to give them their flowers for how they were able to protect Bo Nix year one in the NFL and how efficient they were on the ground with their running schemes for running backs that weren't upper echelon in the NFL. When we look at some of these running back rooms, they were working with what they had on that offense with that cap situation, like we kept alluding to earlier in this podcast. And that offensive line really was the difference maker in this offense, keeping Bo Nix healthy year one, getting that play action game working efficiently, and opening up holes for the running backs when their skill set didn't allow them to creatively try to break away in the open field to create plays on their own.
Yeah. So, Bill, do you have anything to add on the Denver offensive line?
No, I think Josh hit the nail on the head there, especially when you look at their tackles in Garrett Bowles and Mike McGlinchey, both of which who were written off by several outlets. The fact is that they were able to protect Bo Nix, and a lot of the pressure issues that Bo Nix saw were just because of those rollouts. Obviously, when you use a lot of bootlegs and a lot of rollouts, you're going to invite inside rushes to that inside shoulder, and even the best offensive tackles will struggle with that. And they still protected him at a very well clip. I think if you're Sean Payton, you have to figure out where is the balance between those rollouts and allowing the tackles to just get beaten like drums every week. And that's probably going to be the biggest thing that this offensive line is going to fight through in 2025.
Okay. So let's flip to the Denver defense. So, Bill, how would you describe the Denver defense?
Yeah, so when you look at the Denver Broncos defense, it's weird because it's not really a given scheme. It's a multitude of schemes. They most defenses build from the front back. So they start with your pass rush, then you obviously build your linebackers, and then you build your defensive backfield. Where they're built from the back front, this defensive backfield is probably going to be the absolute strength of this team coming into this season, because, when you look at their, defensive EPA, they were first by a significant margin. They, led the league in sacks last year. 63 was a franchise record for them. You had the defensive player of the year in Pat Surtain, and then, oh, hey, by the way, go out and get Jahdae Barron at 20th overall and add him to either the nickel slot, the opposite boundary, or you could throw him as a rover back there in that defensive backfield. And then, you have edge rushers that are young, that are talented, that are rotational guys, Nick Bonito, Zach Allen, even Jonathan Cooper. And then they went out and they spent money on top of that to get Talona Hufanga at the safety position. Again, we're throwing more money in the defensive backfield. And then also Dre Greenlaw. Vance Joseph is kind of like from that Fangio tree a little bit, where he likes to be aggressive and attack. But he also has his own spin on it, where his attacking is making his defensive backfield, his corners, his safeties, just beat up on wide receivers for 60 full minutes. And then by that point, you watch parts of last season, those wide receivers, especially the AFC West divisional games, the Chargers, the Raiders, the Chiefs, by the fourth quarter, they were like, Mom, I want to go home. They were ready to pack it up on the bus and just go home and call it a night. And that's the type of defense you're going to get from Denver.
Yeah. So, Josh, how do you describe the Denver defensive scheme?
I describe them as, in all honesty, probably the most underrated defense in the NFL last year, and having the most underrated defensive coordinator performance last year. Let's be real, Vance Joseph was not the shiniest. He's been around the NFL a long time, but he's never had that pedigree of an upper echelon defensive coordinator. And last year, he damn sure proved it with the players he had and how effective they were. And not to mention, they added significant talent this year, both from San Francisco with Dre Greenlaw and Taoloa Hufanga joining over on that side. Two Pro Bowl type players on that defensive side of the ball that are complementing what they already have. They're not stepping in there being head and neck above everybody else on that defense and trying to carry everybody with them. No, they're complementing the pieces that they already have, and they've done a great job in the front office building this defense from the ground up. And when you get guys like that, you'll get developments of guys like Nick Bonito, who turns from a serviceable rotational defensive end to an actual legitimate Pro Bowl defensive end with the production and how good he was with his speed and his coverage ability off the edge. You get Patrick Surtain going from a top 5 corner in the NFL to the legitimate defensive player of the year, and there was no contest behind it. Nobody was like, oh man, they're just giving it to a cornerback just so they can switch it up. No, he genuinely deserved the award last year. They had Alex Singleton, for example. Sorry, I'm going through the depth chart. I don't have it all written down, but Alex Singleton going from a serviceable starter to a 150 tackle machine who's not a liability in coverage and a damn good run defender. Zach Allen, who they bring over in free agency, turns from a serviceable defensive lineman to a Pro Bowl defensive lineman who's not only a pass rush merchant, but can hold up on double teams against run games and flow inside-outside zones to make plays on ball carriers. They've turned serviceable starters and developed them into legitimate Pro Bowl starters. And every year in the draft, they're adding guys who will continue to add to that depth. That's one thing they're going to have to continue to work on, depth on key positions. For example, their left defensive end and right defensive end. Savion Jones is the only legitimate backup defensive end that they have on that roster. Everybody else is trying to make that 53 and earn their stripes on that roster. You can say the same thing with the nose tackle position. You can say the same thing with the safety position, with Devon Key being the backup free safety as of right now. JL Skinner and PJ Locke really haven't earned their stripes yet as well. You also have a little bit of a cornerback battle that's going to be developing between Riley Moss and Chris Abrams-Strain. Chris Abrams-Strain was somebody that was really high on the draft cycle a couple years ago, and Riley Moss being the white cornerback everybody loves. He's been a serviceable starter, but he could be replaced in the near future. But there is a lot of promise on this defense, and like you alluded to last year, their production was way above the talent they had on paper, and it's really good to see a guy like Vance Joseph bring in new talent and develop from the ground up what they already have.
So Bill, what was your draft evaluation on Savion Jones and Q Robinson? Okay, so it looks like Bill lost audio. So, Josh, where did you have Savion Jones and Q Robinson on your board?
Savion was a borderline top 100 guy for me, a guy who could play inside out, a stand-up defensive end, could play on the interior defensive line, and that's going to be his role backing up Zach Allen and John Franklin Myers coming into this year. I liked his pass rush ability for a guy that doesn't have amazing get-off or explosiveness. He wins with power. He wins with hand usage. He has adequate bend at the next level. He wins with mental processing. He's a tough competitor. He can work on his pad level a little bit, especially getting out of his stance, but his raw strength, his toughness, his competitiveness coming from LSU. It showed early on in the season, and you like the flashes that he brings as both a run defender and as a pass rusher.
And then how about Q Robinson?
Q Robinson is going to be huge for this defense if he develops properly. A guy that was very toolsy, didn't have a lot of starts under his belt, a lot of college time, but get off and bend off the charts, a guy that could win with a dip, could win with a swipe and a counter. He doesn't have the power profile you're looking to and a little bit inexperienced as a run defender consistently off the edge, but you love what he can bring you for third down on this team and just brings them another guy that they can bring in as a rotation in case somebody goes down and really try to develop him a little bit because he already has the tools to be effective on third down right away for them.
Bill, how about you on Savion Jones and Q Robinson? Where were they on your board, and how do you think they fit into the Denver scheme?
So Savion Jones was a little bit lower on my board. I had him as a day 3 guy. He was a guy that you definitely could use as, like Josh alluded to, as a backup defensive end, a rotational piece. He was never going to be a starting defensive end. Had a little bit of a pass rush bag, but wasn't going to light the world on fire. I think he lands in a perfect spot in Denver where he's not going to be expected to be the guy starting off, because you have, Zach Allen, you have even John Franklin Myers that people forget about as well. You have Jonah Ellis, you have Nick Bonito, you have a lot of names where Savion Jones can come in on like a NASCAR package and just wreak havoc. Same thing for Q Robinson. I was in the minority in the fact that Q Robinson had an undrafted grade for me last year. He was a UDFA on my board. He was as raw as gas station sushi. And this was going to be a guy that if you drafted him, you were going to need to develop him from the bottom up in terms of developing that pass rush tool bag. He had a motor, absolutely, could go all night, all day, but there wasn't much beyond that. I go fast, I play with hair on fire, but that's about it. So for him to land in Denver, especially where they're going to probably use him, if I am Vance Joseph and I'm looking at Q Robinson, I'm standing him up for 60 minutes and saying, see ball, get ball, hurt people with ball, and go fast while doing it. And that is exactly what I'm asking Q Robinson to do in year 1.
And Q Robinson is probably more of a traits draft pick, right? Because my understanding was, let's see, Alabama, right? So I had to go verify I had the right school. But at Alabama, I think he was playing behind, was it Chris Braswell? And then Dallas
Turner, and then LT Overton.
Yes. So he was playing behind all those guys, didn't get a lot of starts. And then when he did start, he got hurt.
Yep.
Right. That was, yeah. So to me, that feels like you're drafting on the traits, not necessarily on the film. Is that
100%? 100%. It's a lottery ticket selection in the fact that if you get him and he develops, you look like a genius. My concern is that he's 24 years old. He's an older prospect. So how much more where are we at in the bell curve of his developmental cycle? Are we at the ceiling or are we at the ground floor? If you're at the ground floor and you think you can spend the next 3 to 4 seasons developing him and end up with a star, you're solid. But I have concerns on how high you can develop him.
Okay. And then if you had to compare, Josh, where Jonah Ellis, Q Robinson, and Savion Jones were on your draft board, how do you, right? Because that's a lot of day 2 level players at the edge position. So how do you kind of triage your evaluation and how they would fit into Denver.
Well, I just went over their NFL draft recap, and what I saw was they were a little bit of a reach for me compared to what their grade was to where they were drafted in that position, but it was a need for them in their depth. Like they genuinely went after players that they will play this year, whether they're developed or not, at least situationally, just to get them rotational minutes and keeping their starters fresh, especially when we get into the middle of the season, making sure injuries aren't happening, keeping everybody healthy on that defense. Because they have proven in the second half of games that they can take over and dominate when they are healthy and when they have the stamina. They, like you said earlier, AFC West teams, for example, were scared to get into the fourth quarter with them because they were so well prepared, they were so locked in. They really took over games in the fourth quarter and had quarterbacks and receivers who were a little bit tired, on the edge of their seat a little bit. So they were a little bit of a reach. Savion Jones was 137th on my board. He got taken inside the top 100, so just a positional reach there. And then Q Robinson was 167th on my board, and just a little bit overdrafted. I think about 20 spots over. But they were in positions of need, and they went after those guys at a premium with their last two, like day 3 picks before they went into Jeremy Crenshaw, the punter, in the 6th round, and then Caleb Lautner, the tight end out of Utah, who also played basketball in the 7th round.
So, and you want to add anything on Denver? I know, I'm glad to see that your car issues have solved themselves to get you home. You want to add anything on Denver before we pivot?
I was stuck in. I was stuck on the side of the road for about 2 hours there, so I anticipated being here in time, but you know how AAA can be. But I think Denver is going to be a good team. I think specifically a lot of the guys they drafted last year makes it so that way they don't technically need to have a lot of guys that they drafted this year make that big of an impact for them, especially on their defense. Like they have Jonah Ellis coming in, like they drafted Q Robinson, they drafted Savion Jones. They drafted these guys to come in and try to play early, but they already have guys pretty stacked on the defensive line. So I think they're doing the right way outside of their first-round pick, which you really do want your first-round pick to be kind of more of an impact player. They're really insulating their guys on their defense there. And the same thing similar with offense, where they have players at every position where they hit, and they're kind of insulating it where they aren't being forced to play those guys, rush those guys in the lineup, and they can be a good team and establish an identity with starters and then get those guys to develop more. And then also, just to touch on their first-round pick with Jahdae Barron, having him and Riley Moss, two guys who can be inside-outside type players, be very multiple there. So I do think I'm excited for the Broncos. I'm not the biggest Bo Nix guy, haven't been since his draft class, but he came in, did what I thought he would do. I'm not sure if he has much more past of what this past season was, but I think that might be your typical Bo Nix season every year. And if you're getting the wild card round and having the prove roster around them, I think you're in a good spot. So I don't think they're going to challenge for like the AFC West divisional title or anything, but I do think they'll be pushing for the playoffs there.
Okay, so that finishes up our Denver Broncos portion of the podcast. We are now going to pivot and do our scheme analysis of the New England Patriots and a little bit of our draft summary for New England. So, Owen, do you want to kick off how you would define the New England Patriots offensive scheme under first-year head coach Mike Vrabel?
Yeah, so it's pretty easy for me to do this because it's basically, Mike Vrabel learned under Bill Belichick. Josh McDaniels is the offensive coordinator again. You can just kind of run back a lot of the stuff that they've run for the past however many years that we've had to deal with the Patriots being at the top of the league when they had Tom Brady. For offense specifically, Josh McDaniels, when he had Brady there, and we've kind of seen this evolve a little bit, but not really as much as you'd like to see in his next few stops. But it's a lot of pro-style stuff, having the quarterback have a ton of option reads, being able to get on the same page with his wide receivers, read the defense, know his weapons are going to be going one way or the other based on the defense's leverage and coverage, and the quarterback needs to know all the different possibilities and options as receivers can run before he hits him. And it's a lot of power, vertical running. I have read some stuff recently out of the Patriots training camp that they're trying to implement a lot more of the zone running schemes. And I think this is McDaniels taking a step, knowing that he has the future of the franchise on the roster, a younger player with Drake May, who he doesn't have Tom Brady anymore. He needs him to be somebody that can process through quickly, but maybe not as fast as he'd expect for what was required of his previous offenses. So I'd expect to see a lot of the old stuff we saw with the Patriots, but in addition to that, some more of that Shanahan West Coast wide zone stuff, working off some play action to get some of their offense going. So I think schematically you're going to be seeing a little bit of different tweaks to that, but still kind of the bare bones of what we've seen previously.
And Josh, how would you define the Patriots' offensive scheme?
Yeah, right what Owen said. We've known from Josh McDaniels in the past that he likes to work under center, getting those gap heavy power schemes rolling with their running backs and then working slight play action off of it. But when he wants to work in the passing game, he wants to work those shotgun moving motion around, short game offenses, getting receivers open on double moves, intermediate routes on the offense, a lot of timing routes, a lot of multi-layered concept. It's a very pro-style offense, and I think last year with Gerard Mayo, you started to see the first iterations of inside and outside zone really getting incorporated into their scheme. And I don't know if Ramondre Stevenson was the best fit for that scheme. They added Antonio Gibson to also add to that a little bit, but with the addition of Travion Henderson this year, I think you will see the evolution in the Josh McDaniels offense because he realizes, like Owen said, this is not Tom Brady anymore. This is Drake May, a damn good quarterback that has his flaws and weaknesses, but it's a different type of skill set he's working with, a guy who's bigger, faster, more mobile. Some would say not a stronger arm, but he has been proven already to stretch the ball down deep downfield with touch and with arm strength. So this is a guy that can do a lot of things with Drake May, and I think he's starting to see the evolution of where he's going to have to take this offense, and we saw that with the selection of Travion Henderson.
Okay, so Bill, if you had to look at the New England draft picks specifically on offense, and you had to look at Travion Henderson and the offensive lineman drafted, what would be your summary of the scheme that you think best suits the players that they drafted?
So if you're looking at the best suited scheme, it's Josh McDaniels. The one thing he's never really had is a quarterback who has the ability to move the pocket. When you look at the quarterbacks he's had, Tom Brady, he's not fooling anybody. You had, Derek Carr, and as much as Derek Carr has a little bit of juice, he's not going to move the pocket and bootlegs and get out and roll out. You had Mac Jones, who's not rolling out anywhere unless it's in a wheelchair. You had Cam Newton, who was not the Cam Newton of Carolina. So he now has a guy that has the ability to get out into space and run. He's not Lamar Jackson, right? And he's not Josh Allen, but he has the ability to get out and move. So when you take the offensive lineman that he has in Will Campbell, in Jared Wilson, both of which were very athletic for guys of their size, both of which have the ability to move inside, with Travion Henderson, who is a very good pass catcher. And that's the one thing that's going to be understated is Travion Henderson is a very good pass catcher, and he's going to have the ability to get out into space and help bail Drake May out, especially when you look at short passes out of the backfield of the running back or the equivalent of a run game. I also think one thing that's going to be understated in this offense is the RPO game, which Travion Henderson ran very well for Chip Kelly at Ohio State. So that's one thing that definitely is going to help improve this Patriots offense as they move into 2025 is the addition of RPO concepts, which I think Jared Wilson, Will Campbell, and Travion Henderson will bring to this offense.
And Owen, how about you? Where do you see the Patriots offensive draft picks? And I think really the only other offensive player that hasn't been mentioned is Kyle Williams. But how do you see the Patriots offensive draft picks fitting into the scheme?
Yeah, so I think Travion Henderson is like the big tell for like what we're talking about with the zone move, the move towards zone running, and some of the other things they're going to do in that with using their backs in the receiving game as well. Like Travion Henderson is the beacon of the draft picks that is going to indicate that move is happening. For me, I think some of the other draft picks you're seeing that really indicate that is going to be the offensive lineman they took. Jared Wilson, Will Campbell, bringing those guys in to compete for jobs. Will Campbell slotted right now in to be the left tackle. Guys who can move, are able to run, have requisite power to run the old system, but also has movement ability to also be operable in a wide zone scheme. So I do think that they're looking to get more athletic at all their lineman positions. You already have a guy who's a good athlete in Cole Strange. And you've had some stopgap options: Garrett Bradbury, Morgan Moses at the right tackle. So I do think that's what they're indicating as well. Another way that they're going to indicate moving more towards more of a wide zone running offense is having some more of these more athletic linemen come in, or at least that's what they're trying to tell us here. And then Kyle Williams, and you know what? It wasn't a draft pick, but they did pick up my guy, Afton Chisholm III, or Chisholm III, or however you pronounce it, and as a UDFA. And I mean, Pop Douglas on the decline, Keishawn Butte is the slotted backup slot. He could definitely make that slot, at least the backup slot position there. So I do like that. And then also you see some of the other guys who are second-year players that they have on the roster that could make some impacts. Jaheim Bell, who's kind of like, if you're going to be looking for them to go to like more of a Shanahan-style offense, Jaheim Bell is like this fullback, tight end hybrid, kind of in Kyle Juszczyk mold, where he didn't really get utilized last year in that offense. But if they do end up moving more towards that system and that style, you could see him be implemented a lot more, especially in the passing game there. I was just looking at their team stats, and their leading receiver was Hunter Henry with like 600 yards receiving. So you had the addition of Stephon Diggs, who we'll see if he can still be an outside receiver in the NFL at this point. Matt Collins, I wouldn't want him to be my starting number 2 wide receiver. So I could definitely see Kyle Williams as draft pick fitting in there. And looking at the rest of the depth of this receiver room, even though I like Chisholm, there's Diggs, Hollins, Douglas, Butte. None of these guys are really like burners. Kyle Williams is the only player they've brought in that really offers them like a legit speed option at wide receiver. So it also plays more into like they want to hit the play action, hit the shots deep. So they definitely made some investments with their rookies that kind of indicate where they're trying to move towards, but also players that aren't totally unfamiliar with playing that older style of system. So they have kind of a bridge gap between who they brought in as free agents and as well as who they're drafting in to develop into their newer system.
Josh, how about you? Any like, can you put a bow around the Patriots offense and their scheme and their draft picks?
Well, we're going to see the improvements Drake May makes from year 1 to year 2. I would be in the boat that said he had a really successful rookie year, and there was a lot of promise in his film disregarding the regular season record that they had and what troublesome they went throughout the season. I think he was a bright spot for them. We're obviously going to see the improvements there. We're going to see the improvements on the offensive line, bringing in, like we said, Will Campbell and Jared Wilson, but Garrett Bradbury and Morgan Moses to be 2 starters on that offensive line who can both plug right now and protect Drake May, but can also incorporate both power and zone schemes to this offensive line in this running scheme. So that's going to be good to see the improvements from the offensive line and the backfield. But in my mind, there is a lot of mouths to feed in this receiver room, and I'm not sure they have a lot of receivers designated for a specific role. Like Matt Collins, for example, the blocking type, bigger body type, the guy that will box people out and contested catches. Demario Douglas and Afton Chisholm, you could say they're more slot wide receivers. But then you got a lot of receivers like Stephon Diggs, Kendrick Bourne, Kyle Williams, Keishawn Butte, Jalen Polk, Javon Baker, who are all good or genuinely average at everything, but don't really excel in one thing. It's going to be interesting to see who wins the battle between all of those guys and how the route distribution and the target distribution really turns out this season. Because you want to see development from your draft pick and Jalen Polk and Kyle Williams, even though Jalen Polk didn't have as good of a rookie year as we all expected him to. You still want to see Stephon Diggs get as many targets as he needs because you paid him all that money. You got a lot of hope in Afton Chisholm. Like, there's a lot of mouths to feed in this receiver room, and I don't know if Josh McDaniels is going to be equipped to give everybody the proper development and to pick out the guys who genuinely deserve to have starting roles and stick as their starting receivers. So that's my only concern with this offense. But God, I love Drake May and the improvements they've made on the offensive line.
Okay, so let's pivot to the Patriots defense. Oh, and actually, before we pivot to the defense, there was another question I had on the Patriots offense. So what kind of offense did Vrabel run with the Titans, right? Because he had Derrick Henry. My vision is that would be more power running with Derrick Henry when he was with the Titans. Do we think, like we've alluded to, they're shifting to what looks like more outside zone? How do you think that evolves, right? Like, does Josh McDaniel say this is what he wants to do? Or like how do we think, like, does the offense follow the head coach? Is it staying with Josh McDaniel? How do we think that flavor works?
Well, first you got to think about this being the different personnel from Tennessee. Brian Tannehill was the quarterback, the helm of that receiver room. They had one good wide receiver in A.J. Brown for the most part, so their whole passing game was revolved around him. And it was a power scheme. Everything runs through Derrick Henry. And you're still going to see that. That is Mike Vrabel's. That's how he was built, ground and pound, toughness, win at the line of scrimmage. You're not going to see that element go away in this offense. You're still going to see Ramondre Stevenson get about 50% of the touches as a running back, and they're mostly going to use him in those gap scenarios, those counters, the A and B gap, the duos, the whole 9 yards. But I think this year you're going to see the outside and inside zone move more to a 35-40% clip. And then going into year 3 of Drake May, year 2 of Travion Henderson, you'll start to see the transition of that might be the base running scheme that they run, just because of the development Travion Henderson has in year 1 and the personnel they have on that offensive line. But that is still the backbone of Vrabel. That is still the backbone of Josh McDaniel's offensive scheme in the past 5 to 10 years. So that's not going away, but you have seen their hand of them trying to evolve their offense in such a way.
Yeah.
Okay. So Patriots defense, Bill, it's a first year, right? Vrabel's a first year head coach. So if you had to assess what you think the defense will look like scheme wise, what do you think it'll be?
Yeah. So when you're looking at New England's defense, before I get to that, I'll piggyback on Vrabel's offense, though. The one key thing that Josh hit on a little bit, Vrabel as a head coach and an offensive play caller is going to build his scheme around what his players do well, rather than saying this is a rigid scheme, this is what we're going to run and be all end all. Their goal is to play aggressive and be flexible and change the tempo of their offense as a whole. But when you flip to the defensive side of the ball and kind of what this defense is going to look like under Terrell Williams, who was the defensive line coach for the Lions last season, the big thing when you watch that Lions defense, you saw a lot of blitz heavy man-to-man scheme style, and part of that is that's Aaron Glenn running that scheme, who's now the head coach of the New York Jets in the same division. But you're going to have a lot of the same thing. The other thing that you saw with Mike Vrabel in Tennessee is he ran a lot of 4 down lineman fronts, a lot of 4-2-5 nickel looks. And I think you're going to probably see that come back into the forefront, especially if they marry those blitz man schemes with his 4-2-5 scheme. When you look at the Patriots under Gerard Mayo, they ran more of a 3-3-5 scheme. So you're looking more 3 down defensive linemen, 3 linebackers, 5 on the back end. So you're still going to have that nickel look either way. I think primarily you're probably going to end up seeing a lot of one gap techniques on that defensive side of the football. You're going to see a lot of, hand in the dirt defensive ends. I think ultimately where they're probably going to land is a 4-2-5 scheme with a lot of nickel looks, as well as a lot of man-to-man coverage and blitz heavy schemes. Vrabel is going to throw the house at you, especially with that 5th nickel, whether it's a corner, it's a safety. He's going to have the corner blitz and the safety blitz package and play circled, stamped, burned into his play call sheet. We're going to see it from space. He's going to have it circled so many times. That's probably what I would see from this Patriots defense in 2025.
Oh, and how about you? How do you see the Patriots defensive scheme?
I think when it comes to the scheme and how we're going to look at the player personnel and what they fit into it, it's another way when we're saying, Josh McDaniels took over the offense. When we were talking about the offense previously, it's going to be very similar to Patriots offenses of the past because of that. Vrabel was a defensive coach under Belichick, and it's a Belichickian style defense. And like how Bill was saying, it's going to be a lot of 3-3-5. In reality, as someone who now has to coach a 3-3-5 and has to figure out how the hell I'm going to make that work, especially with Vrabel, that comes down to a lot of blitzes. It's a 3-3-5, but they're still going to have these hybrid edge linebacker types. Like they drafted Braden Swinson. They have guys like Caleb Von Chason out there and Brittany Jennings that are going to be players that can stand up, drop, but also you like maybe in 2-point stances off the edge who can roll up. It can be a 3-3 base, but realistically, you're going to be seeing a lot of 4-2s, a lot of 5-1s. You're going to have a lot of players that are going to be rotating in and blitzing. They're going to have so many weird pressure packages and looks because that's what Vrabel did in Tennessee. That's where he loved guys like Arden Key there. He had Bud Dupree for a season. They brought in Harold Landry from Tennessee over. So that same kind of archetype of player that can be and run in those different exotic-looking fronts and exotic-looking blitzes to kind of confuse that offensive line and make them not know where their blocking assignments are in the run game, and to also whose assignment is what when it's coming to pass protection, and especially when you're trying to pass protect against with like a 5-man front, you're really going to have trouble with understanding where your assignment is, who to pick up, who's the most dangerous man coming off of where, because they can come from any point. And then you also see that with their DBs, their secondary. You have Jabril Peppers and Kyle Duggar, these more versatile pieces. You have Marcus Jones as a slot corner. These players that if you were to switch from a 3-3 and then rotate down into like a 4-2 or a 5-1, you have these like bigger bodied safeties or these slot corners that are more comfortable playing your line of scrimmage that can rotate down. And now instead of it being a 3-3-5, it's essentially a 4-3-4, a 4-2-5. He has so many multiple variable looks that he can throw at you, and that's what they really like to have is these players who can at whatever level have a mismatch of size, athleticism, and being able to play multiple different spots on the defense, be these multiple chess pieces, so that way they can give you specific looks. They're not looking for like a very specific type of player for any one position. They're looking for a guy who can play several different positions and have maybe like a base position in the first place, but you're never going to see one guy be like, oh, that's our outside linebacker every play. He's never going to be our designated pass rusher. He's also like our edge 1 or edge 2 kind of guy.
So, Josh, this is the team that drafted Braden Swinson, and they got Braden Swinson in round 5. What's your impression of where Swinson was taken? And then remind us of your evaluation of the player, because I know that was a player that you really liked.
Well, Braden Swinson was really high on my board compared to consensus. He was 29th on my board, a first-round grade, which if anybody's going to stick their neck out for a prospect, usually one of us stick our neck out for a day 3 guy or a third-round guy going into the first round every single year. Braden Swinson was my guy this year for that, and it was good to see a couple other creators put him in that same category towards the last month of draft content, prepping up towards the NFL draft. But blows by me how he fell into the 5th round. At worst, he should have been a 3rd-round top 100 pick in my mind, just because of the ability to play the run right away, how smart, how tough, how tenacious he was. Even though he's not the best athlete in the world, he's able to win with hand usage, technicality. He's a really smart and well-developed edge rusher already, and that's what I've noticed about this New England front 5, at least to my eyes. They're not looking to win based off athleticism, off of quick get-offs, quick bends. They're trying to collapse the pocket within and play into their strengths, like Owen just said, being able to be versatile with their back end, being able to have multiple looks at safeties, roll into a 1 high shell, back into a 2 high shell, being able to bring exotic blitzes from their nickelback position. They have Marcus Jones and Jabril Peppers, who they're going to be able to interchange throughout that nickelback position, and they're going to be able to match and cover, whether it's man or zone, and they're going to be able to be effective off of those nickel blitzes. But that defensive line with Keon White, Christian Barmore, bringing in Milton Williams from Philadelphia on a $20 million deal, that's going to be a very formidable defensive line against the run, and they're going to be able to collapse the pocket with him from power. And I think their edge rushers are built to do that as well. Let's not get this twisted. The Patriots have always been a well-run defense team on the defensive side of the ball. Even in their really bad seasons the past couple of years, they haven't been a bottom 10 run defense in the NFL. Last year was a little bit of an exception, slipping down to where their standards once were, with Gerard Mayo being the head coach instead of defensive coordinator. But they've always relatively been well against the run, and Robert Spillane's now going to head that, the free agent signing from Las Vegas, who had a good bounce back year for Las Vegas. But the ability to be able to mix and match their safeties, roll from 1 high to 2 high, disguise coverages, bringing in a guy like Craig Woodson in the 4th round from California, being that true free safety role, really gives that flexibility to both Kyle Duggar and Jabril Peppers. they're going to be able to do a lot with this defense. And if you look back to what the Detroit Lions defense was, that was very comparable. Brian Branch being as a box safety, moving him back to a boundary, moving him from a nickel, having him in versatile pieces. You do the same with Jabril Peppers in this defense. Having a lockdown corner with Christian Gonzalez only helps to that, so they're able to just change things up constantly on that defense. This is, like you said, it's going to be a 3-3-5 team. This is going to be a 4-2-5 base team. This is going to be a 3-4 team. They're going to change their fronts constantly, and they finally have enough formidable starters to be able to do that consistently.
Okay. So, Bill, where did you have Craig Woodson and Joshua Farmer on your board?
So Craig Woodson and Joshua Farmer both were day 3 talents for me, but they were day 3 talents to keep your eye on. And Craig Woodson, especially because the big thing that you looked at Craig Woodson when he did it at Cal, he lined up everywhere, single high, box safety, nickel, up, down, left, right. This man, anywhere. So I think he's going to end up doing the same exact thing in New England, just like Josh talked about. You're going to have Christian Gonzalez on one side. You're going to have Carlton Davis III on the other. So now you have a combination of Kyle Duggar, Jabril Peppers, and Craig Woodson as your 3 others in that 4-2-5, 3-3-5 look. And you just let them keep the ball, and Craig Woodson is the thumper, or vice versa. That's what you're going to get. Joshua Farmer at defensive tackle, I really loved him when he was in 3 tech spots at Florida State because he had such an explosive first step. That ball is snapped and he is in the backfield having lunch with the quarterback. That's how quickly he's there. He also just closes space in a hurry and pushes the pocket well. And I think him being next to Milton Williams in those 4-3 looks, in those 4-2-5 looks that they go to, I think is going to be a nightmare for offensive linemen to handle, especially in the middle when you have Milton Williams. And then you also, oh, by the way, you have this athletic freak in Josh Farmer right next to him. And that's not to say about Christian Barmore, who's more of a nose tackle. Let's just throw him out there. So now you can have Farmer maybe potentially flex out to an edge, a defensive end in a 4-3 look, or you could even go with a 5 down defensive lineman look if you wanted to really get freaky in New England, which I think they may ultimately end up doing with this scheme.
Oh, and how about you on Joshua Farmer, Craig Woodson? And I don't know that you've talked about Swinson yet. So all of the Patriots defensive draft picks.
Yeah. So I think we're getting towards where the defensive line is kind of a microcosm of the whole defense itself, where they want it to be multiple looking and versatile. And the players they drafted specifically play into that. And I'm looking especially at like Farmer and Swinson. So this is technically a 3-down lineman system, but Keon White, being a 290-pound defensive end, can flex inside the D tackle. He has the athleticism to play like a wider edge alignment. And you have players like Farmer, who I also had a day 3 grade on, but he's a guy who is slotted in to be behind Milton Williams, another super freaky athlete who was a D tackle on an even front for the Eagles, now playing a 5 tech role more towards the edge for this Patriots team. So you have a guy who has inside-outside versatility. Same thing with Keon White. Barmore, who's like their nose tackle, is like their player that's going to be like exclusively the interior player. But if they wanted to make it an even front, they can just flex whoever they want in from those 2 guys and be more of a defensive tackle based or defensive end being a defensive tackle. So then you have a guy like Braden Swinson, who I had like a 4th round grade on him. I thought, played hard, had really long arms, strong hands. So somebody who would come into a team like the Patriots specifically and be more of a compression style runner, can really play the run. And I feel like his fit with this Vrabel defense is perfect for what they look for in their edge players, especially a team that's going to really value stopping the run, forcing you to throw into their DBs, which they have a good setup back there with Christian Gonzalez being a top 10 corner in the league. You have 2 good safeties in Duggar and Peppers. So you have Swinson, who I didn't really grade highly because I didn't really see the upside as a pass rusher specifically, but someone who long arms, can get home with power, and has a high motor. So with a team like the Patriots that runs a ton of blitzes and is trying to generating manufactured pressure, you have a guy that can execute that well and is a bigger, stronger guy on the edge. So not only are you asking him to come up and play the edge, it's kind of going along with that whole thing where if you had a smaller linebacker that you're also asking to do the same thing, maybe not work out as well. But Swinson, being someone who plays with a ton of power in his upper body, is able to be more of that flexible piece for them.
Well, does anybody have any additional comments on the Patriots defense before we pivot to our commercials and things of that nature?
Wow, we have given them a lot of credit for the improvements they've made on both sides of the ball. If we're going to talk about a negative, at least in my mind, I think there is a lack of speed on this defense overall, besides a guy like Christian Gonzalez, who will always be that super athlete. If they get in a track meet race, a yard after catch race with these receivers, or they're allowing big plays, big explosive plays to running backs on the outside, I don't know if they have the speed to catch up with and keep these guys under 30-point games if they start getting tired and fatigue and injuries start setting in. They're really good, really fundamental against the run. They're able to collapse a pocket and do so many different things, generating pressure. But I think that lack of speed will be evident on this team, especially at the edge position when you got Harold Landry, Anthony Jennings, and Braden Swinson being your true edge rushers, outside linebackers. Elijah Ponder and Marte Mapu are probably your fastest get-off guys at the outside linebacker position, and Elijah Ponder is an undrafted rookie out of Cal Poly, and Marte Mapu is a project versatile defender out of Sacramento State. So guys who haven't really proved themselves yet really are your best athletes on the defensive side of the ball, at least for the linebacker core moving back into the safety and nickel corner position. But I don't think these corners also have the speed either, besides Christian Gonzalez. So Marcus Jones, you're going to be really relied upon to be kind of that speed guy to cover man-on-man in the nickel position, because you're going to want to push Jabril Peppers and Kyle Duggar back there. I think if they add some type of speed element on this defense, especially at the edge position, that will do wonders to try to get them to that next level of being a top 10, top 12 defense in the NFL. But that would be my only concern for them.
Yeah, and I think, so to add on to your point about the speed, so if this team gets into anything resembling a shootout, which doesn't bode well with who they're in the division with, whether it's Miami or Buffalo, both teams that can put up points, so we talked about their weapons earlier. We did say like we liked some pieces they had and saw the direction they were going with the running game, but Stephon Diggs off a major injury, who was looking to be more of a slot-only type player for the Texans, kind of regressing towards that mean. Now he's going to have an abundance of targets, whatever he wants from this offense, he's going to be able to demand. But I don't know if he's going to have, especially after that major of an injury, the same juice to be an outside receiver again for them. Mac Hollins is currently slotted to be the outside receiver for them. I'm assuming that's why. The reason why for that is that they want to run more of that wide zone or have him be in there for run blocking purposes, but that's not conducive of a player of being able to throw the ball a lot. Like, as someone who watched him play for their team last year, his contributions in the offense was really nice, but it was more of like a fourth, fifth wide receiver accent piece where you're like happy for what he chipped in. And then Pop Douglas was second on team in receiving yards, but as a slot receiver, he's not the most athletic or dynamic player. So you don't really have horses in that wide receiver room. Like, you have a bunch of guys you're hoping to break out. Maybe Jalen Polk in year 2 or Javon Baker, your rookie and Kyle Williams. You have guys you're banking on maybe taking a step for you. But that, in addition to, I don't love the additions they made in the O-line with Morgan Moses and Gary Bradbury. Like, it's significantly better than what they had last year. Don't get me wrong. It's definitely a major upgrade, but it's not like they're top of the line players for these positions. So they have pieces that they're hoping can be better than like what they had last year, which isn't a far hill to climb. But I don't know what the ceiling is for those players there. So between that and the fact that they lack speed on defense, so if they're going to get against teams that can score the football or score in general, they are not going to be able to hold up, especially. I think it's going to be a lot of Drake May carry us in the passing game. If it's going to be a game where you need to put up 27-plus points, I don't know how many of those games the Patriots can win. So I do think they're taking the steps in the right direction. They're going to be more of like a 7-8 win team this season. But I don't think, especially with who the teams are they're playing in the division, excluding the Jets, because it's the Jets. But excluding them, they have 4 games against teams that can score the ball easily and have proven to do so against even a good Patriots defense, like Josh talked about in years past. They've still scored against them. And then you have other matchups in the AFC. I think they're playing the AFC. Correct me if I'm right. I forget what their schedule is this year. But even if they're regardless of the division they're playing, they have teams that they're going to be going against that can score a lot. So I don't expect this team to be able to be ones that can put up consistent, like 24 plus point games. They're going to win a lot of grind it out, run the football, stop the run on the other side, possession games. And I just don't think they have the pieces right now to compete when it comes to having to throw the ball in a passing league.
Okay, so this is one of my funnest times of year because I get to create a draft order for my simulator. I have the Patriots as one of the top 14 teams in the league. So I have the Patriots making the playoffs. But I have them ahead of Miami, let's say, in the AFC East. But I'm looking at Miami as – I think Miami regresses from the standpoint of they're really not – let's say 3 or 4 years ago, Miami didn't draft well. And I think you see the results of that like 2 years later, right? As your veterans age and you haven't replaced them. But anyways, let's pause for some quick commercials. Bill, thank you for joining us on Wednesdays.
Absolutely.
And you want to let everybody know who you are and how they can find you.
Yeah, so you can find all of my content over on X at Sparks Scouting. I also have a Substack. You can go check that out as well. Sparks Scouting is the name for that one. Also a writer and analyst for the Right Way Sports Network. That's TWSN.net. You can catch me this Friday night with Durst, Anthony. We're going to be talking signal callers for the upcoming draft cycle. We've got a few names, and I believe we've got a special guest this Friday as well who's going to be joining us and having a little fun with us. But yeah, like I said, Spark Scouting on X or Spark Scouting anywhere you get your social media. Come clip my takes because I can guarantee you they'll be freezing cold come September 1st. So yeah.
Owen.
Yeah, so you can find my stuff. First off, you can find me here on the Draft Professor. Normally, I'll be here for the full hour, but today, excluding on Mondays and Wednesdays, covering future draft classes. We're covering the 2026 draft class right now, going team by team. This upcoming Monday, it's my baby. I convinced Jim to allow me to do a all MAC episode. We're going to talk about players coming out of the MAC this Monday, so I'm excited about that. But you can catch me there covering teams and draft prospects for the upcoming season on them, as well as here on Wednesdays. Right now we're doing the team previews like you saw today, but also once the fall comes around, me and my partner from last year, Newt, are going to be covering defensive linemen, both edges and D tackles every week. So you can see us talking about 8 prospects a week there. And then as well for other videos and stuff, I have my own YouTube channel at Weekly Huddle. Newt, like I said, another draft professor has been posting his top 10 rankings. I've been making some videos, got them in the pipeline. Me and Bill are actually going to be recording tomorrow. We're going to be running our first 2026 mock draft, so we'll see how that turns out. Jim, you brought up how you have your own draft order. I made up mine, and I have the Patriots below the Dolphins, but only by slightly. They both missed the playoffs for me, so that'll be already a difference there. So go ahead and check that out. We're going to be recording that tomorrow. It'll be up soon thereafter. So I have a ton of stuff there on YouTube, like I said, here on the Draft Professor, and then Twitter at Weekly Huddle, where I wore this shirt specifically because if you are interested in seeing any kind of takes, this was the shirt I wore to when I saw Pitbull and T-Pain in concert, and me and Newt were debating music last night for like 2 hours on Twitter, and so I thought I'd bring this one out to reference that back. So if you're interested in any crazy kind of sports or just anything else takes, over there on my Twitter at Weekly Huddle is where you can catch that.
Josh.
You guys can follow me on Twitter at juice_T23. My full offensive and defensive rankings from the past draft is on there, as well as other content you're going to be getting throughout the summer. But for now, you'll get me on Wednesdays at 9 p.m. here on the Draft Professor, going over the AFC teams every week until we get all the AFC teams done. And then we're back on Mondays like we were last year, going over 2 different positions for the 2026 NFL draft. And we're going to be going over that throughout the whole entire college football season. Also sprinkling in things like what's gone on in the past week in college football, headliner news, things that we need to be talking about, whether that's through NIL, teams going up and down in the rankings, injuries, the whole 9 yards. You're going to catch that on Mondays during the college football season with me and hopefully whoever else we get on the Monday podcast. It was Jake last year. Hope we get Jake back this year. But we're here on Wednesdays for now and then be back on Mondays during the college football season.
Yeah. You can follow the channel. There we are. At NFL Draft Fanatic. No, I am Fanatic. It is the same on X as it is on YouTube. You can also catch the podcast on Spotify and many other places. So look for it on Apple Podcasts. Tell me if you find it. but we are now broadcasting the podcast out to quite a few places. This is also, we have daily draft content. So we have podcasts like this coming at you every day. This is actually really interesting because, last year I was podcasting with Josh on Mondays. I was podcasting with Bill. It seemed like every day of the week, but I don't even remember. I guess it was Wednesdays and Fridays. And then Owen was on Thursdays.
Yeah.
And I know that each of you has podcasted with one of the other, but I don't know that the three of you had ever been in the same room before. But I owe a lot of the channel, or I should say the channel owes a lot to all three of you, because without you each committing to, hey, would you podcast scouting reports for 5 weeks? We wouldn't be here right now. So it's actually really cool to see all of us here. Josh, Jake has given me all indications that he's back, but I don't know that Jake is going to start podcasting until October.
Right.
When we start doing scouting reports and such.
Mm-hmm.
But so we've got about 80 podcasters at the Draft Professor that create content. There's about 22 who show up every week, and then we have guests like Clint Ghost is coming on Friday, and Clint podcasts about once a quarter. So we have people that make guest appearances, and that's just what makes the channel ebb and flow. So for the 80 podcasters at the Draft Professor, for Josh, Owen, Bill, myself, thank you for watching. We will see you on a podcast again tomorrow. Have a good night, everybody.